Alright, for this lesson, well, in the last lesson we touched on the extrude tool, and for this lesson we're going to continue working with that, and we're going to go into another sort of editing mode here. So we've worked in object mode, where you select the entire object. We've worked with face mode, where you just select specific faces. We use the extrude tool on the face of an object. And now I'm going to have you right click, select your the walls or whatever part of the wall you can. Right click, go up to edge. We did a little bit with edge working on the chairs, but I'm going to select the top edges of my walls here, and I'm going to click extrude. Okay, so you see that it does this weird, half of it goes up, half of it goes down. I'm going to hit Z to undo that. I've still got it extruded, as you can tell from the arrow and block little manipulator. But I'm going to hit W to put on my move tool. I'm just going to move it up. I'm going to hit R to put on my scale tool. I'm going to scale it in. You can kind of see what I'm making here. Now, my roof isn't going to be exactly close, but what I want to do is make something that looks enough like a roof, just so that when I render it, you will see that we're sort of inside a house. Okay, so I've got a bit of a roof. It's not actually closed, but that's alright. It looks good enough. And I'm going to go back into object mode here, deselect the house, and I'm actually just going to zoom in and see what it looks like kind of up close, make sure we're alright. Oh yeah, okay. So now you can extrude faces, you can extrude edges, you can extrude points as well. I don't do that very often, but you can. So I actually kind of want the house to have a black roof. So I'm going to go back into face mode. Just going to click and drag a selection here, make sure I've got all three pieces of my roof. Right click. Okay. Well, I typically will right click and go down to assign new material, because I know, what a blend looks like. I know what a Lambert looks like. I know what a Fong looks like. If you know what material you're going for, you can right click and go down to assign new material. Otherwise, for the time being, you can click on the rendering tab and say it's a roof, so I don't want it to be very shiny, I want it to be black. I want it to be a Lambert. Make that a little darker, and voila. So let's go ahead and look inside my house. We'll just do a quick render here, and looking at it, you can see that I'm not quite up to my wall, so you can see outside of it. There's not a whole lot of light, so you can't tell the difference between this side of my roof and my environment. So now we have to get into kind of lighting, because even though we're in a 3D environment, we still have to put in the lights. So where we think lights would be. I mean, I don't have any windows, so essentially I'm going to have to put a light in. Now, you can do it any number of ways. Typically I'll model an object that looks like a lamp, and then put a light in the lamp, rather than make the lamp itself light up. But regardless of how you actually want to do it, if you click on the rendering tab, the same place where your materials are, these first 6 buttons, these are all lights, different types of lights. We have an ambient light, just to, set the mood. Directional light, which will go in a direction. Point light, spotlights, area light, and volume lights. For this particular scene, I'm going to use an ambient light. Put on my move tool. I'm going to move it up so there's some light. But if I render it now, you'll see my scene is way too bright. Now it's really lit up. Okay, so I want to leave it white light, but rather than have an intensity of 1, I want to have an intensity of like, let's try 0.248. Okay, that's better. It gives a little bit of a dim light. And then I want to add, we'll add a spotlight. With the spotlights, you can see that it's got a cone and it's pointing in a particular direction. So you can use your move tool to move it around, turn on your rotate tool to kind of point it where you want it. So we'll just pretend that I have a light hanging over my table. Okay. And I know that this is going to, I'll go into my top view. I know that this is going to shine directly through my table. So we haven't set it up to do shadows yet, but we will. Okay. So now you can see the little light objects, but they will not render. So you can see exactly what I'm looking at in my viewport, but when I render, where the light is, it's gone. You just see where it shines on the table. That's why I say you have to actually model something that looks like a lamp or whatever, and then put a light in it. Now, you can see, like I said, it shines through my table, because I haven't told the computer at all yet that I want shadows, or I want, what I want. So I'm going to give this a little bit more intensity. I'm going to give my ambient light a little bit more intensity, but I'm going to make it a little bit darker of a light. And I'm going to say that this is an incandescent bulb, so it's typically not pure white. It's typically more of a, yellowish cast to it, almost bordering on brownish. We'll go that. It's not going to be completely accurate, but we'll have a look-see. Not that big of a difference because it's shining on a brown table. Okay, so now here's the thing. How do we make it so it doesn't go right through everything? Well, there's a couple of places we have to go. First, we have to go up to our render settings and click on Maya Software. Okay, remember the render settings is this fourth little clapboard looking button. And first I'm going to change my quality to production quality. And then there are two different types of shadows. There's ray trace shadows, and ray trace shadows are actually the ones we're going to be using. So just turn on ray trace shadows. The other one, depth map shadows, are less processor intensive. They take less computer power to render, but they're less accurate. So for this particular, I'm just going to turn on ray tracing and leave those as is. Okay. Now you have to tell which lights are going to use ray trace shadows. What ray trace shadows are is they trace the light rays. So they would trace it from where the light shines to where it hits, to where the light would bounce, to what it would bounce off of, how it would cast shadows, and all that lovely, lovely stuff. Well, I don't want my ambient light to have ray trace shadows just because I don't want it to cast light in all directions from here, because that would look a little awkward. I only want this one to cast shadows. So, you can turn on depth map shadows if you want a little bit less accurate, but I'm going to use ray trace shadows for this. You can use one or the other, but not both. So now that I've turned on ray trace shadows in my render settings and in my attributes, I can render, and you'll see it no longer goes through my table, and also you can see that the light has reflected off of the bowl. You can see that the bowl catches some of the light, the bowl reflects in the table. You can see that the carpet and things reflect off the chairs because the chairs are shiny just like the table. Now you get more of a sense of what materials are. So that's a little bit about ray trace shadows, a little bit about lighting. With lighting a scene, when you're lighting the whole scene, typically you'll want some sort of ambient light and some sort of directional light, a kind of a backlighting and front lighting type thing. You just have to play around and see what looks good. Play with your intensity, you know, is it daytime, is it nighttime, and all that. And that's pretty much all that's required in modeling a scene. You just have to play around and put them together.